call this meeting of Amador Regional Sanitation Authority for Thursday, January 16th to order. We have a quorum, and would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the States of America.
This time is our public forum opportunity for the public to speak on any item not appearing on today's agenda. And since we have no one here in the audience, we'll move on then to the consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments in regards to the consent agenda? If not, Tom, did you have anything of highlights on there? It looked fine to me.
Yeah, in my comments, I was going to go over
Okay.
the budget a little bit.
Okay, if there are none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. We have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then we'll move, motion passes. We'll move on then to the general manager's report.
Yeah, so first of all, welcome to our new board members. I guess one thing looking at the consent that I didn't put in my update, you know, in terms of the reservoir report, we did pretty well
You know
this.
what? I think Bruce just pulled in. If you
Okay.
want to wait
Sure.
1 second.
Probably got stuck in downtown Jackson. Got a big sewer problem down there. Get the rain all day.
Is that what the Main Street's block?
Yeah, that's what it looked like. Yeah.
And I was stuck on 16 for 2 hours.
For 2 hours?
What was that? Tuesday? There was
An
like
accident or?
Yeah, there was an accident, and I was like 3 miles from home, and it was like an hour to go around. So
Yeah,
I
my
figured
wife-
I figured I'd wait.
And she pulled up on that and was actually administering first
I
aid.
think it was like a fatality.
It was a single fatality. One person was taken to the hospital. Another
So it
person
must have been
released.
by the county line there or somewhere?
No, it was at Jackson Highway and Island Michigan Bar Road there.
Michigan Bar, well, that's just past the county line.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
Yeah, luckily I was right at Ione Road, so I could
That's a bad
turn.
spot.
Yeah, my wife pulled up. She wasn't sure if it was 3 or 6 vehicles. There's cars on their side, 2 stuck together, and then there's cars all over the place. She was probably 1 minute from where it happened. But she just rolled right up into it.
Sitting in the
Chilling.
car, so.
Okay. I was just going to say on the reservoirs, you know, so sometimes it depends how much we can dispose on the golf course, but we got quite a lot disposed this year, so we're in pretty good shape. You know, if you're trying to make sense of those numbers, basically says we got the reservoirs down.
How many acre feet did you dispose of last year? You know?
About 250 total.
Okay.
Ione did stop taking some. We had more to give. They were going to do some testing, and then that got put on hold. But I mean, the biggest thing was CDCR used a lot of their own spray fields this year,
Yeah.
which I don't think they've always done. So that helped a lot. Just wasn't a lot of conflict in terms of who gets to send water to the golf course.
Yeah, I know year over year they take total 650. I think 350 from there and 300 from here, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I think when you start getting into this later down in this
Okay,
water
sorry,
balance, we're gonna see
Sure.
that 650 number is not realistic. They just,
Yeah.
golf course can't even take that.
Yeah, so I thought I'd go over, so again, welcome. I thought I'd go over a few things, kind of where we are in terms of this ARSA dissolution. Just give you kind of an update on our budget, and then we're gonna go over these water board orders. And we have the consultant that's working with us online. It's gonna help go over that part of it. So first of all, the dissolution, again, you know, this has been it's almost a year process so far. City of Sutter Creek basically is 100% responsible for the operations of ARSA, and it's about 85% of the cost. And, you know, after a series of discussions, the board voted last year to dissolve ARSA. And, there's some benefits in terms of cost savings, administrative savings. We also think it's going to help us in terms of getting funding for a new treatment plant and kind of being able to kind of get a little more efficient and organized. It also aligns better with the current customers. So when ARSA was formed, Jackson was part of it, the county was part of it. That's no longer true. It's really AWA and Amador City and Sutter Creek. So last year we voted to dissolve. We began a legal process. There's, basically Sutter Creek would be the successor organization. We have to assign all the contracts and to Sutter Creek. All the agencies involved passed an amendment to the JPA agreement itself that would enable Sutter Creek to become the successor. And now we're in the process of basically finishing off those transfers of agreements. And once that's done, we'll be able to dissolve. The lease of the ARSA pipeline is from CDCR. We have begun to transfer that lease. It's been going on for months. They say they are willing to do it. It's just very slow moving. And then we're also working on agreements with AWA and Amador City that would essentially replace what was the JPA with kind of basically a wholesale agreement between them and Sutter Creek. Effectively, it'll operate very similar to what's in place now. So do you guys have any questions about that? Today's really just kind of update and Q&A.
Going back to the reservoir report, this year we were purposefully taking it much lower because we need to do some drain repairs on Henderson, right? So we had, the city of Sutter Creek put aside about half of that money in our last budget, and we'll put aside the rest. So it has to be empty to fix it.
Yeah. I think we always want to take it low. And again, it depends on rain, and it depends again on whether CDCR uses their spray fields and reservoir.
Yeah.
The other thing that started is, all the lawsuits have been settled at this point. We started having regular operations meetings where I don't think the parties have been talking for at least a year. And that was really good. I mean, we would get together for lunch once a month. We would talk about the plan, and I just felt like things were operating pretty smoothly.
What has regional weighed in? What is their opinion on this? Or, I mean, before previous meetings, they're like, you're all going to dance. They really didn't care. They wanted regional, like all the way down, but I don't know if that's still the case or not, or they.
Say that again?
Regional Water Quality Control Board, do they have anything to say about it, or?
Not that part of it. Again, we're going to get to that.
Okay. Get ahead of it.
There's some stuff after.
Okay.
In terms of the budget for this year, we're in pretty good shape. We've been managing the costs. We did have an emergency in December. A pipe broke. We weren't sure how big or how hard it was going to be to fix, but got it done pretty quickly. And like Claire said, we're reserving funds for this repair to the reservoir. Basically, the outlet pipe is falling apart. It's like half there right now. It's probably going to be around $800,000, and we did a reserve about $400,000. But we have to get the reservoir pretty much empty to repair that pipe. And then we got this water board order, which was unplanned, and that's coming out of our professional services fees that we had budgeted and some contingency fees. And so, Dan, you asked about the regional water board. I think they're basically fed up with everybody. And so they issued, I think, 4 separate letters, one to ARSA, one to ION, one to CDCR, and then a 4th one, which was a joint letter. So in December, we all filed individual water balances to show how each of our systems work. And now the next step is this joint water balance where we all have to work together and agree to the numbers. And so what Jim was saying, like contractually, we say 650 acre feet, but the golf course can only take like 400 acre feet or something. So the numbers don't add up, and the water board is basically putting it on us to agree to numbers.
Yeah.
And they're also saying they're going to issue new permits as part of this process. So,
That's been a long-standing situation. I mean, the water balances, I mean, this is actually, that's major progress, honestly, to get that figured out. I mean, being on the Ione side for years, I mean, we could never seem to make heads or tails of it. I mean, we were getting numbers from one side than the other. This is good. Also, too, I was wondering, I was gonna ask you, about the water balance. Shucks. Oh, do you attribute the lower amount of use on the golf course to operations or to, because it's a very hot summer, they should have been using like, they will use about 1 million gallons a day on a normal year, not let alone a year where it was 107, 105 for weeks.
you know, so we're having these operation meetings. Nobody from the golf courses come there. That's been the least transparent area to me, is
Interesting.
how much can the golf course actually take? You know, the operator for my own, Justin, seems like a great guy.
Yeah.
He says, you know, they're taking as much as they can.
That's I'm just curious because I know Jim probably knows as well too. They take about 1 million gallons a day almost every
Yeah.
day, like, all the way through.
I mean, they have like,
Historically, though, they've never taken 650 acre feet.
Right. We've taken right up to it. I know that plenty
Yeah.
of times because that was.
they do have some like water features in the golf course that they're not really filled. I guess
So
they don't want to fill
I was
it.
gonna say, they're incentivized, I would think, to minimize the amount of water that they take to reduce costs.
I think it's kind of a flat rate, I think. I'm not
Yeah, it wouldn't affect it. The amount of water they take, the only thing that would
Well,
affect it would be.
they have pump
chemicals
costs,
and
pumping
stuff.
costs and chemicals. I'm just talking about the variable costs and getting that water onto the golf course.
Yeah.
So they might be incentivized to, oh, we'll let that part. I'm not saying that that's the case, that they do, but so
I know, just,
they're not coming to meetings to communicate. It's
yeah,
kind of hard.
I'll meet with the city manager tomorrow and we can have a discussion about that. But
Yep.
I know before it was typically, chemical costs. Because sometimes when you take that first plume out of press and it would overcharge your system and smell complaints, all that kind of stuff, and they'd finally get ahead of it, but it was using a lot of chemicals to get through that. When it finally coned out and it wasn't bringing that much stuff through the pipe, it was fine again, typically throughout the rest of summer.
Yeah. So, you know, again, just kind of high level with ARSA,
Mhm.
you know, to be frank, I mean, this board is kind of winding down.
Yeah.
We canceled a bunch of meetings last year. You know, unless there's something that we need a decision on, you know, we probably won't meet right now. It's a lot of, again, getting these legal contracts done. So, you know, until they're finished, unless an issue like this water order comes up, just so you guys have your expectations.
Yeah, sure.
This is done. Right.
Before it's dissolved, though, it does go back one more time to the county, to the Sutter Creek City Council, the Amador City, to the original JPA members to
Yeah.
approve it again. It's already been to each of those boards. Once to start the process, once to do that
Yeah.
amendment that Tom talked about, and then it will one more time.
I mean, the way the lawyer's set up, we're kind of in escrow right now, and then we'll have the closing.
Like a cashless transaction.
Right. It's pluses and minuses. We're taking on all the liabilities as well. And so,
And any estimation on the timeline?
so,
I know it'd be a guess, but.
yeah, I wasn't sure Frank was going to be here today. So Derek, who's the city attorney for Sutter Creek, is kind of ramping up on ARSA. Frank is starting to share agreements with him. So I basically have asked Derek to help me get these agreements over the line with AWA. And then Frank is still pushing on the CDCR front. So,
Frank's the ARSA attorney.
okay, so that's it for kind of the general update. Go on.
And I guess then we're ready to move on to item 6. Tom, do you want to take that?
Yeah, let me pull up this thing. So we got these water compliance letters. We basically retained Hydro Sciences who's worked on the ARSA, and they worked on Sutter Creek's master wastewater plan. And we have Stephen online, who helped do a lot of this analysis. And so we'll basically go through this presentation. Stephen, you there?
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Tom. And thank you for having me. I think you did a good job introducing everything in the background. So you can go ahead, go to the overview. The next slide, please.
Yep.
So as Tom had mentioned, all of the parties received their individual 13267 orders. We've already responded to the board, and now we're working on the joint orders, which is issued to the group, which we're moving forward with, working together to continue using the system. So next slide, please. So to give everyone some general background overview on what the system is, here's a flow diagram for the water balance analysis. The city of Sutter Creek Secondary Wastewater Treatment Plant receives wastewater from the city of Sutter Creek, Martell, Amador City, treats it to secondary standards, and then sends it down the hill for disposal. Between the facilities, there's two major reservoirs. There's Henderson Reservoir, and there's also Preston Reservoir. The first stop for the water is essentially at Bowers Ranch, where it's on a 40-acre land application area where they do flood irrigation. Then after, if it's applied at Bowers Ranch, it then goes to Henderson Reservoir. Henderson Reservoir has a capacity of 392.8 acre feet at 2 feet of freeboard, which means that they're between the max water surface and the crest of the berm, there's 2 feet. Then after Henderson Reservoir, it gets sent down the hill to Hoskins Ranch, which is a 60-acre area, but I believe only 36 of it is actually used for sprinkler irrigation. After passing Hoskins Ranch, it then goes to the Preston Forebay, which is a 2-acre surface area. It's basically a pass-through. It doesn't actually increase or decrease in terms of storage. It's just a constant level. And then it makes its way into Preston Reservoir, which is a 235 acre foot capacity at 2 feet of freeboard.
Stop there for a second.
Yep.
Yes, a couple of things. The Bowers Ranch, flood irrigation. The water boards don't seem to really like that very much. We're a little concerned they may have us stop doing that. And then between the two, Bowers and Hoskins, it's all very manual. So whenever it's on, we have people out there operating it. Cows break the sprinkler heads all the time. It's just a lot of labor, a lot of potentially weekend overtime. And then that Henderson Reservoir is the one we talked about that needs the repairs. So all of this it's about 9 miles long. I've been told it's pretty unique in the state in terms of how we get rid of our wastewater.
Yeah, that's fair.
And we lease it. We lease it from CDCR essentially. So we don't own all of this. And in terms of long-term capital planning, we have about $30 million of repairs and upgrades that are needed. A lot of the pipe is extremely old. It was put in by juvenile prisoners. So very small clay pipes that they were able to put in. So
Yeah, I read the 2004 draft a couple days ago. So yeah, not a lot changed in some areas, but anyway, just a heads up.
Okay, Stephen, just wanted to give background as you go through. So.
Oh yeah, thank you. So from Preston Reservoir, ARSA would then transfer to the Castle Oaks Water Reclamation Facility, where it gets treated to tertiary standards and then applied at the Castle Oaks Golf Course. At Preston Reservoir is where there's like shared facilities with CDCR from the 2007 agreement where it was mentioned that they have an agreement up to a total amount of 650 acre-feet to dispose at the Castle Oaks Golf Course through the cow riff, as we call it, for the tertiary treatment plant. However, back in 2016 and possibly even earlier, there have been contention between the parties because it used to be a pass-through through Preston Reservoir, which would essentially everyone was trying to dispose of water through the Castle Oaks Golf Course at the same time. So with CDCR disposing at the same time as ARSA, it would basically prevent ARSA from getting rid of it. This all kind of came to a head in the winter of 2016, 2017, because that was exceeding a 100-year winter. And so the Preston Reservoir was basically at capacity and upstream facilities became strained also. As a result, that kind of set the stage for the water board issuing these 13267 orders, and they even cited those water years in their letters. Okay,
Yeah,
Tom, I think next slide, unless you want
well,
to cover anything.
so when this process started, nobody even agreed what this diagram was. So this is kind of, I think, the first time the parties have all agreed, and we've seen like the size of CDCR's reservoir, which is quite large. Their spray fields have been reduced as the prison has grown. And then on the Ione side, again, they have their own secondary plant. They have, you probably know better than I do, Dan, they have some fields. I think one's owned by the city, one's owned by Rancheria, Jackson Rancheria. And then there are some potential, I think, fields shown on here on this side, Woodward Bottom, and there's some alfalfa field. Those aren't being used. There's potentially a lot of disposal there.
Those aren't being used.
They're not permitted, and in terms of permits, I don't technically, Mule Creek isn't part of the permit. And Ione's secondary treatment plant is not connected to this tertiary plant. And I think all of these plants are nearing capacity. So I think Ione has some interest in connecting their secondary plant to the tertiary plant. But again, if we're already at disposal capability on the golf course, then there's a question of, even if we treat it, where does it go? And then Stephen, were you gonna talk about the backwash at all? Is that coming up?
Yeah, I was about to point out that you'll notice the cow riff, about 10 to 20% of the influent flow into that facility gets sent over to the City of Ione's secondary wastewater treatment plant. This is about twice as much as a standard plant would expect to see. So it increases the demands at the cow riff quite a bit because the backwash is necessary to keep the filters running. So this has been identified as a capacity stream that could be reduced, meaning that it would reduce the demands at the cow riff possibly in 5 years or even further along, which would affect ARSA because it'd mean ARSA could send less water basically to cow riff throughout the year.
And this exercise basically asks us to look at a 5-year forecast, but it seems like really the 5 to 10 year is where we're really potentially going to run into issues. There's a lot of new developments in Ione and, beyond the 5 years, but, potentially we're doing this exercise for the water board, but then there's the reality of what's going to happen kind of after 5 years.
Yeah, to fill in some blanks. So the AWA, the backwash in Ione, there is a thought they may be running that water out to the mine out there. If you probably know some of that. I want to talk out of turn here, but and then I know Woodward Bottom, if you don't know, that pipe is upsized at 30 inches where it connects into the Ione plant, because it does connect in there. It's not a hard connection, but it's stubbed out there. That was envisioned to be a chlorine contact chamber at some point if it was needed for extra capacity. I talked to the operator on the campaign trail, and I don't think they were going to plant alfalfa down there. It sounded like more like a Sudan grass or something. It'd be a little bit less water consumptive, but it would definitely take up, it would take up some water. But just, I don't know if you probably have already talked about all this. I'm sorry if I'm.
Well, it's kind of weird. The pipe there was built by CDCR.
I know, I
So-
was a part of it.
So again, there's also this
I
question. like-
fostered that thing right along, so I could, want more
Yeah.
details, I can give you more.
So there's some weird things where it's like owned by CDCR, potentially operated by ION, and people are asking like, well, if we connect this up, like,
See, so that was envisioned. It was part of a mitigation project. I mean, I was on the chair putting the thing together, and so we were trying to figure out ways that we could make it more flexible for all of us, not just for ION, but it would provide another place we could dispose of water. And the CCR, they graciously paid for the whole thing. I mean, I don't know, don't tell the governor probably, but it's one of those things where we looked at it, had our engineers look at it, and it was stubbed into the ION plan again. So if we needed to chlorine contact at the time, they were, you know, how the board can be sometime. We're trying to feel them out and figure out what they wanted. They won't always tell you. So we just had it constructed to be able to be flexible. So if we did use chlorine contact, awesome. If it's too big, it doesn't really matter. It's just water flowing through a bigger pipe. And then the ION connection pipe, I'm not sure where that's at in planning. I haven't been a part of that process for a couple of years, but I do know that was also to run between the main plant and the tertiary plant to give some flexibility. So in a dry year or a year, like we had a problem 2.5 years ago where CDCR went down and ARSA went down at the same time for a variety of reasons. It wasn't really anybody's fault kind of thing, but that was when everybody's complaining about the golf course going brown. And so that interconnect pipe was designed to be able to give us some flexibility on both ends so we could run water one way or the other. And that's just kind of some background for you, but hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah. And there have been some more recent discussions with Jackson Rancheria. I think they'd be willing to take either secondary or tertiary water and even potentially take secondary water for a number of years while some of these other improvements are being made. So, you know, that would even be able to route water without going through the tertiary plant, be a lot cheaper. So I
Well,
do
and
think
if
there are
need be
options.
too, I mean, I don't know, I mean, I'm not speaking for anybody, but like I say, that chlorine contact, and there's place on our property, the city, I say the city's property. I'm counting now, keep that straight. But there was an area there to actually put in just a chlorine device that would basically treat the water, because that pipe was designed for the diameter and the length to be able to have the water fully treated. So when it came out in the other end, went in the forebay, it was ready for application and met all the legal requirements of what water would be, so that when it was put on the field, it's good to go. And it was designed to streamline permitting if it ever came to that. So that's what it was there for, just for background.
So who owns the pipe?
That's a good question. I believe CCR does. It was one of those deals where they built it and owned it, but as far as the operations of it, it was designed for us to use. That was the whole point behind it. They weren't planning on I'm not sure how they sold it to the higher ups, but I know that there was definitely left room for us to be able to use it.
I've heard that they bypass permitting process. Is that true?
I don't believe that's true. Not on my end anyway. I don't think so. It was a state project that was. I hope they did. I don't think they would.
I wouldn't think so, but
Yeah.
I have heard that.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that before, but not to my knowledge anyway. I'll say that in the microphone.
All right, so keep going, Stephen.
Okay, great. So going back to the 13267 orders, the water board had identified that the permits are out of date, that the capacity issues from 2016, 2017 were an issue, and that they wanted everyone to submit their analysis of their water balances using average year and 100 year return period rainfall conditions, and which we've done. And then if we wanted to continue using the system, that we would craft a joint water balance and submit it together, which we're in the process of doing. Next slide. So these requirements for the 13267 letter, they pretty much applied to both our individual order and also the joint order. We have to look at our current flows and conditions, and then the forecasted flows and conditions within the 5-year period, and then look at where our land application is happening, how many acres, what's the rate, what's the climatological conditions, like the 100-year return period rainfall, and then look at the past 5 years of data, certify it, and submit it. So we've done all of that. Now it's crafting what does everybody's outlook look like in 5 years, and are there going to be reductions at CalRIF? Is, how much can we accommodate from CDCR at CalRIF and ARSA at the same time? And pretty much identifying if there's going to be an issue at the end of our calculations. So next slide. So looking at our progress, we've done everything to submit our individual water balance. On January 27th, we'll be meeting with the water board at their Rancho Cordova office to see if they've had any chance to provide us feedback on our individual water balance, see if there's any comments that we need to incorporate. We anticipate it to be minor comments. And then by February 1st, we intend, or ARSA intends to submit a letter of intent to submit the joint water balance with the other parties like CDCR and ION. And that joint water balance tech memo is due May 1st. So those last steps we're still in progress on. So next slide, please. So looking at our flows over the next 5 years, it looks like it's a very small amount of average dry weather flow growth. It's only 2.17%. So by 2029, we're looking at about 0.319 MGD, or 319,000 million gallons per day. The more significant flow throughout the winter is the infiltration and inflow, which is the over on the right side. You see that 2.687 MGD in 2029. This is actually reduced from current flows because of the city's efforts to replace or rehabilitate some of the collection system. So we're actually showing that in the winter, it's actually not as big of an issue in the 5 years condition.
Hey, Stephen, can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
So with the I&I, Sutter Creek experiences probably like 8 to 9 times our flow during the wet season. So we're trying to work on that actively. We're spending a decent amount of money each year to try to get some projects done that we know are going to help out. So we're hoping to get it down to 5 or 6 times. That's our goal. So that's why that number decreases overall, because we're hoping to have less water down the road in a couple of years.
And what's the I&I largely attributed to?
Storms mostly. I mean,
is it like drains or pipes or manholes? Or?
We don't know exactly. We're trying to target the mains right now. We have a feeling that it might be shallow groundwater, and then it would just be all the laterals. So that would be a harder problem to fix. But we're hoping if we get the mains done first, that we'll see some decrease in our I&I, and then we can move on from there. So that's a hope.
Could you
Sorry.
briefly describe the monitoring system with the?
Yeah, so we have about 12 flow monitors in our manholes right now. They've been in there since about, I think, December, something like that. So they're continuously tracking our flows right now in all the basins. We're going to try to figure out which basins are kind of contributing more to that, and then we'll target our money into that area of the collection system piping. So we're hoping to get, if we get some rain, then we'll get some good data. We got one storm, so it showed up, but the ground wasn't saturated yet. So once we get about 4 inches of rain, that's kind of when our ground gets saturated. And then after that, you can kind of see when a rainstorm comes through, within about 5 or 6 hours, it's all gone. So it comes to the plant and then it goes right through. So we know it's attributed to storms. We just don't know exactly where it's coming from.
Downspouts, that kind of thing at all?
I did a couple smoke tests here, or a smoke test here about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And we found some little ones, you know, a couple cross connections, but no smoking gun. So, you know, we've tried to pick away at those, but we're not, we didn't find any smoking guns. So yeah, we're still kind of investigating.
They did smoke testing back in the 80s probably also.
Yeah,
I think then they did find a lot of downspouts, but
probably.
so a lot of them were addressed then.
Yeah.
All right, here's the eye chart.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So this table, it's a lot of the numbers here, but basically, looking at the first rows A through C, you can see that the the Sutter Creek wastewater treatment plant, the effluent flows are between 440, projected to about 530 acre feet per year, depending on if it's average year or 1 in 100 year conditions. The facilities, like Henderson Reservoir, Preston Reservoir, they also collect between 120 and 230 acre feet from precipitation and runoff. And row C shows that even with these inflows, we still can dispose of additional volume if it were to occur. But don't want to focus on that too soon. So looking at row D, it's Henderson Reservoir's maximum storage volume under those conditions. So you'll see that this is typically reaching the maximum capacity, and that's an operational consideration because you want to retain as much effluent storage as you can in the uphill facilities before you send it down the hill and it can't be applied anymore. So typically Henderson Reservoir, it reaches full, and then we start saving or retaining effluent in Preston Reservoir later in the year. And then looking at our disposal results, those are not too, those have basically been benchmarked to 2016, 2017 water year, where it was most similar to the actual 1 in 100 year disposal operations. So looking at all of this, it shows that we can adequately store all of the effluent, we can adequately dispose of all the effluent, and we actually have about 75 to 184 acre feet of disposal capacity that isn't being utilized. And that's a collective number total for Bowers Ranch, Hoskins Ranch, and the Castle Oaks Golf Course. So looking at the Castle Oak Golf Course irrigation demands, which you can see on row J, it identifies that the Castle Oaks Golf Course can only take between 423 to 482 acre feet in a year. That's a far cry from the 650 acre feet in the 2007 agreement. This was an estimate provided by the city of Ione, so and the operators of the Castle Oaks Golf Course.
That original number is somewhere north of 900 at one point, probably, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, something like that, but whatever reason. Any idea how much capacity is taken up from which sediment in either Henderson or Preston?
Yeah,
Oh,
go ahead.
yeah, the bottom, it is estimated that it's a pretty negligible amount. It's only between 2 to 4 feet in Henderson, whereas Preston Reservoir, it hasn't as much data, so it's a little bit harder for us to estimate the actual amount in the bottom of there.
Yeah, they did some aerial surveys some time ago, and then, they've applied, Hydroscience has applied some of their models to that. But, at some point, you probably need to collect new data.
So the individual water balance is showing that we have, without CDCR or Mill Creek's flows, ARSA can meet all of its disposal storage requirements. But if we were to take any of the Mule Creek flows, it's definitely not at their contractual amount from the 2007 agreement, and it's still significantly less than their current practices of 283 acre feet per year. Basically, we would be in another situation like 2016, 2017, if a 1 in 100 year event were to occur and CDCR were trying to utilize Castle Oaks Golf Course at the same time as ARSA. Next slide, please. So Mule Creek State Prison, their current flows at 0.38 MGD, which is pretty similar to the Sutter Creek's effluent flow of about 0.31 MGD. Their 5-year flow, they're modeling at 0.54 MGD, which is significantly higher. That's just because there's some uncertainty in terms of prison inmate populations and whether or not they're going to receive more or fewer inmates at any time. And they have a 155 million gallon storage reservoir. They dispose on 200 acres of land application areas. And of course, their agreement is 350 acre feet. They also identified that they could have higher flows depending on their occupancy, but we're only modeling the 5-year projected flow, and those other numbers, those are based on when there was a overcrowding in the prison system 10 or 15 years ago that was identified by CDCR as not really likely to happen unless there's been a really large change in the government policy, which would be unable to even be predicted. Next slide,
So
please.
at
Oh,
a
go
high
ahead.
level, I mean, again, it felt like everybody was really working together. I think Mule Creek basically said we have a really hard time forecasting what our future population is going to be. And so there's kind of a wide range of numbers that they provided.
Yeah, originally, so when they built that new prison, they were going to reduce population in prison 1. And then according to what they told us, that it should be a zero-sum game when it comes down to the second prison. So they're going to reduce capacity, install a ton of water-saving devices that would make up for the water balance. So it was not supposed to change one way or the other. It could go lower but not go higher, if that makes sense. Because they're trying to, because what was happening before is this guy would line up, they'd all flush the toilets at night, flood the place, and create a giant mess. Or they could let the water run, indefinitely. So now it's all on timers. Everything is highly regulated inside the prison itself. The new prison, they built it that way. The old one, they retrofitted it to kind of reduce consumption. And then I know right now too, the modeling for the prison system, if I'm giving you too much information, just shut me up. But I know that they were shutting down prisons, and I was talking to somebody on the inside. There was not on the inside of the prison, but on the inside of the operation. Sorry, clear about that. They were saying that they're actually shutting down wings of prison, not an entire prison, so they don't have any startup issues. And they were running a lot of people in the prison, into CDCR or Mill Creek here a while back. I just seen a lot of vans. I started asking around. They said, yeah, they're running a lot of people in the prison. And it's max capacity, but it was as high as it had been a while back. But it also has a lot of water reduction measures. And I don't know the veracity of all those numbers. That's just what I was told.
Yep.
Directly from staff.
But that's why you see these 3 different numbers. And again, as we've had these discussions, just feels like they can't really get much more certain.
It really depends on who's in office and who's voting on what. Yeah, you're right about that.
When they did the expanded the prison, they utilized the spray fields for the footprint of that prison.
Correct.
Do you know if there was any requirement to replace those spray fields, or if they do, or is it just voluntary that they might increase the spray field capacity?
Well, initially as envisioned, like I say, it was going to be kind of a wash, and Ion had capacity. in those days. I do know, again, talking, I forget, and this is the problem, I've been campaigning, so forgive me, I've been talking to a lot of people, a lot of different places. But they had, I know they are expanding spray fields. I think, if I understood correctly, kind of behind behind the academy, Cal Fire Academy. I know they were expanding some spray fields up in that neighborhood somewhere. That's what I'd heard. I have not verified that. Haven't met with the warden or anybody yet. I'm working on that right now, but it sounds like they are expanding, and you can see it
Would
from.
be interesting to know.
Yes, it would. I know out front it looked like they had either updated some of their spray equipment or they had added some. I couldn't tell which just from driving by. It's hard to figure what they're doing, but I know that all that was highly regulated as far as what types of sprayers and application amounts and all that kind of stuff. And they have that the little bitty dam on the back end to kind of keep any water. Yeah, tailwaters, right? Recovery project, but yeah. If I find out, I'll let you know. I just got to figure it out.
Great.
All right, so moving on.
Yep. So looking at the MCSP results, it looks like they are able to identify a few issues. It pretty much pointed them in the direction that they're going to need to utilize the Castle Oaks golf course and continue to depend on that without any identified large-scale expansion of their facilities. During our meeting with them, they identified it was approximately 40 acre-feet at their lower projected number of 0.54 MGD. And it would get significantly higher if we use any of the other flows like 0.67 or 0.74 MGD. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so rounding out the presentation here, basically ARSA can take between 78 and 185 acre-feet from Mule Creek State Prison under expected conditions. However, MCSP, they have a significant need to continue to dispose of 283 acre-feet and possibly expand it even more. And we've also identified that it's likely that MCSP will need to expand their use of the spray fields on their own site. ION is still working on their water balance and their discussion with the water board of their percolation beds for their disposal. We're also identifying any reduction in the CalRIF capacity based on the upgrades to their backwash flows and any other efficiencies. So basically refining how much water we can actually send to Castle Oaks Golf Course in a given year. All parties have indicated that they intend to participate in the joint water balance, and we still appear to be on track to submit the joint water balance tech memo by May 1st, 2025.
Yeah, so the one thing we hadn't talked about were these percolation ponds in Ione. That it's a separate order from the water board. They're concerned about, I guess, leakage into the creek, but those ponds are needed. So it's another kind of challenging issue.
Yeah, if you want some background on that too. So the initial agreement we have with them, I think it was more formal than anything else, but we have a 6 and 7. They were designed to percolate, which is exactly what they do. There is some upgradient flow. We mapped the whole thing out. We actually we did a study on the water, where it comes from, what kind of water it is. And we knew exactly what ponds it was. 6 and 7 leaked minimally in those ponds. 1 through 4 did. So we lined them, I think, about 6-7 years ago. Those studies are available. The Regional Water Quality Control Board, it was an isotope study. They largely just kind of ignored it. I mean, it was actually really in depth. It showed very specifically, short summary: heavy rain falls closer to the coast, lighter rain falls up. We use lighter rain for our water system when it goes in the system, so it goes back down to our sewer plant. Pond 1 has heavier water in it, and it gets lighter as it goes the lighter water evaporates first. So each different pond had a separate signature. So we could tell which water was in the creek. So we did several testing areas along the creek, up above it and on down below, tested all that water. So we had a very, very good idea of where those isotope structures came from. And typically it came from ponds 1 through 4, 6 and 7, not so much. There was some, but it was pretty minimal. But those ponds were designed to do exactly what they do, and that's to percolate. And our argument had been, it's probably still is, I'm just guessing here, that it is really for max capacity rain events, that when we cannot get our water, it's either spill it or perk it. And that was kind of always our methodology. So we would use those in emergencies only. Pond 6 gets used pretty frequently because in the wintertime we have little minimal disposal ability. So it would go in there, it'd percolate. Pond 7 rarely used except for in extreme situations or typically at the very end of the season.
Yep.
And that pond is actually designed, I believe, to be pumped out into the town field. So
I think the Ione consultant says those ponds should really go dry in the summertime.
they do. They typically do, yeah. They're
Okay.
almost dry
She was
right
saying
now.
that they hadn't been able to, and that's making them less efficient.
Yeah, this year they did. Initially it wasn't a clay lining, but it was just a dirt line. We went in there and tilled them all up, ripped them, and hauled all the junk off. That was 6-7 years ago. But they do a pretty good job. They dry out most years. So.
So that's basically the update. The one thing I'm hearing from you, Dan, is it sounds like at some point the golf course could take more water, and that's a really key assumption in all of this. Is
Yeah.
how much water can the golf course take?
Yeah, that's it's just kind of alarming and curious as to why that is. I know the operations have changed over a little bit. The tertiary plant operations have changed over certainly. I just don't know why they can't take more.
And were there complaints about water leaking off the course, or maybe they backed it off?
Yeah, there were, but they weren't really they were verified. They weren't very real. Like people made a lot of assumptions that weren't completely inaccurate. And what the bigger issue was increasing the nitrogen flow into the creek. That was the larger issue surrounding it. But there's only 1 or 2 greens that actually even have the opportunity to flow in the creek, and they're right on the edge of the lake.
I was thinking, what about the houses and things too? Was that it?
It's largely down the bottom, so it really the houses are typically up a little bit higher on I would say almost everywhere. The courses are lower, so and most of that water. So those ponds, you probably know this, right? But the ponds, they fill them up and they pump out of those ponds. It's a circulation system. Every fall, we waste 1 million gallons of water putting fresh water running through them. That's what's state ordered.
So it'd be good to know if, just again, if that assumption changed, I think it would help everybody.
Yeah, I'll see if I can I think I have the prior operator's contact information. Actually, I know I do. I'll see if I can find out from them. That's just very strange that they're down 200 acre feet when they should be at 650. But I thought they were all the time, but
Yeah.
most years we took full mounts, but yeah, or had close, from what I recall.
Sorry. Yeah. It's 420 to 480. So like 480 acre feet max.
Jim, do you remember, did we take most of your water every year or no? I felt like we took the prison. I thought we took yours first, I thought, right? Chairman?
Well,
Remember?
if you discount the years where there was some issues and the lawsuit and all that came up,
That's fair.
they no, actually, I think if you go back, there was we did a pretty thorough study that for years they were not taking the contractual amount. And I could dig up that letter. Sean Rebay compiled some pretty good statistics that showed why this system over the years, little by little, the water was backing up because they weren't taking the contractual amount. Whether it was because they couldn't or didn't want to, I can't really answer that question. Or they just didn't have the capacity. I'll try to dig that up. So, in answer to your question, I don't think they've ever taken 300 acre feet from ARSA.
Yeah, I mean, part of the contention to 1 year, we needed more, couldn't get it.
Well, there was in a drought year,
Yeah.
maybe we just ran out of water.
Correct.
There was
Right.
no water in Henderson. There was water in Henderson, but it was down to the sludge, and
Right. And I
that
think
was
the
no
analysis
good to
Stephen
anybody.
Wright shows, we do have issues in dry years, but the water board's not asking about that, obviously.
Yeah.
Concerns the golf course, but
Right. That's correct.
Yeah, we had, I mean, the worst year, I think ARSA ran out of water and the prison had some mechanical problem where they weren't even able to legally give us water.
That's when the
That was
golf
3 years
course
ago.
browned
Yeah.
up. got
That was right.
burned-
That's how I
burned.
got out of office, by the way.
but what's really clear, I mean, with all
Yeah.
these agencies and, wanting to make sure you have enough in a dry year,
Yeah.
but what do you do when you have too much? We really need some flexible disposal, which would, again, the golf course isn't really flexible. You want it to be green. It
Right.
can only take so much.
It
So
should be the constant, I think, yeah.
yeah, so I think we need some other disposal, whether it's the Woodward Bottom or whatever, that could be flexible where you could not be committed to give them water, but you could turn it on and off or.
I know there was some contention, and this is just a conversation I had, I know with one of our vendors will say, they need to have a reliable water source. And Ione plant itself is pretty reliable. It's kind of separate from this issue here,
Right.
but trying to get a water balance was not exactly simple, I'll say that. We knew what the maximums could be just because the law allowed it, but what they
Yeah.
actually needed was a different discussion.
Right, but you need somebody that doesn't want a commitment that you can have a buffer, right?
Right.
So. I mean, this is kind of the step we're at now, to figure out what is a solution. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, one creative solution we had was we talked to one of our mines and this was on paper. This wasn't, it never came to, but we were theorizing they might use it for dust reduction on a wet year. If we had a lot of extra water trying to get rid of it. There may be a legal way to spray like tertiary water on dry ground just to reduce the dust. That would be the pretext of the whole conversation. But we had a particularly wet year. I think it was 2017, if I'm not mistaken. But we had some conversations around that. But delivering water was a problem. And below, as far as I own, there's not really any fields to develop below there that I can think of.
Well, you mentioned the Q Ranch, and that would require quite a bit of infrastructure to get, that's quite a bit off of
Locations.
the locations, quite a bit ways off the current infrastructure. The pipeline to Woodward Bottom exists.
It does.
There's no infrastructure for application there yet in place, but the transmission pipeline exists. So that area would make the most sense.
It was
But it may
conceived.
not be a buffer that if they probably want some commitment if they start growing crops.
Correct. I don't know what their, but if the parties put in the infrastructure at their expense and not, it's not, you said that the Rancheria paid for that pipeline.
The prison did.
Oh, the prison did. Okay,
Prison-
I
yeah, state paid
misunderstood.
for it,
That,
The Rancheria
okay.
didn't even own it.
Yeah,
at the
you
time.
shocked me when you said that, and
No,
it's
that's
because
right.
I misunderstood. No, well, you probably didn't say that, but that's what I thought you said.
The Rancheria didn't own it then. They bought it probably a year if it was done, or maybe 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if that seems to me would be your best option for a buffer, if it could be brought online.
Yeah. You guys have any other questions, for Stephen? Or I know it's a
I-
little dry.
I did find it interesting, though. I think you mentioned that the interconnection between the Ione secondary plant and the tertiary plant as a means to supply water in dry years, that would make a lot more sense than diverting water, fresh water from Sutter Creek and introducing it into the ARSA system.
Right.
As
And again, that was stopped. Yeah, that was on
we are
both of us,
part of the requirements of the settlement is to make that diversion point functional.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, again, my whole methodology was to be as flexible as possible. Just imagining everything could go possibly wrong, including fresh water, whatever, but just be able to have the flexibility, versatility, to be able to move water we
Yeah.
needed it, and have water
Mm-hmm.
reliably delivered to those that really need it to be reliable.
So to Jim's point, we had this lawsuit.
Yeah.
Again, this is confidential, but now that you're on the board, you should be aware. Basically, all the parties agreed to walk away.
Yeah.
We agreed to fix this freshwater diversion. I don't think that's necessarily public information. And then we also, they had some issue around Henderson. We went to looked at it together and it really was a non-issue. And then the rest of it was just everybody put down their guns and stepped back. So,
No, it's good to keep that happy.
Yeah.
For sure.
so, okay. Well, and that's all we have.
Very good.
I think that was the end of our agenda too, correct? Last item on the agenda?
Yep.
Need a motion to adjourn? Cause I'll make one.
Okay, I'll just accept that motion and we'll adjourn. We don't really need an emotion in a second, but,
Thanks,
This
Stephen.
meeting is
We're
adjourned.
gonna end the meeting.
Great.
thank
Thank
you,
you, everyone.
Stephen.
Thanks, Steven.
Yep. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
How you doing, Dan?